Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Student Spotlight series, where we showcase some of the work our past students have done. Today, it is our pleasure to have with us Alexander Kremer. So, Alexander, can you tell us a bit about where you're from, what year of school you're in, and a little bit about the course you took with CCIR?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Alexander Kremer. I live in Santa Cruz County, California. I'm 17 and moving into my last year in high school. Um, I participated in the one-on-one mentorship program with CCIR, and I guess broadly speaking, I thought it was a really a great opportunity to learn a lot more about research and um, from a professional in research. Yeah,
Can you say a little bit about like who your mentor was, what the focus of
sure.
the
Yeah,
program was?
yeah. My mentor was Dr. Recht, um, and um, yeah, for my project, um, I I went into the program with sort of broad ideas about sort of looking at music and psychology and any sort of um, connections there. And eventually I came across a pretty interesting study that predicted sort of musical preferences from personality traits. And the personality traits were sort of categorized using the five-factor model of personality, which is a pretty famous model in the world of psychology. Um, and So using a data set from that study, I worked on a data analysis project in which I explored certain trends that weren't covered in the original publication, but still had like supporting evidence within the data set. In particular, I looked at how music preferences and personality traits vary across age groups, as well as across a few of the major countries that were surveyed in this study. Um,
So I definitely want to hear more about your results, but before
sure.
that, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about your initial interest in the connection between music and psychology.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, so I guess like personally, I'm very into music and sort of just interested in music. I have played piano for over 11 years. Um, and I'm also, yeah, very interested in psychology. I sort of was first introduced to psychology through an AP course that I took at school, and ever since then, I've just been uh, curious and wanting to learn more about psychology. And so I think just this connection between um, psychology and music is a pretty important connection to look into because I think for one, we have sort of yeah, we've used musical instruments for thousands of years across almost every culture, and um, so I think just looking at it through like a lens of psychology would maybe give us a better way of looking into sort of um, just like human behavior and yeah, how it connects to music and sort of greatly further our understanding of psychology.
So what results did you end up with? Was there anything new or interesting that came out that wasn't in the literature that you read when preparing to do your work?
Yeah, yeah, there are couple of conclusions that I was able to draw, but I think um, personally one of the most interesting findings, as well as one of the most statistically significant findings, was a very strong correlation between the um, openness trait. So that's how open-minded and imaginative a person is. Um, so a correlation between that and the sophisticated music preference, which describes how, uh, or like, yeah, sort of describes music that is sort of complex and sophisticated. Um, so just like classical pieces or jazz pieces. So there was this very significant correlation at the 1% level, even after Bonferroni correction, across 5 different countries with 200 respondents each. Um, so I think this uh, correlation sort of indicates that despite any sort of cultural barriers, um, we're still quite alike in certain ways, and there's still this sort of strong connection between um, a personality in humans and certain interests in music. Uh, yeah,
So this is kind of a tangent, but I'm curious to hear what you think
sure.
about it. If you read Plato's Republic, for example, in the Republic, when Socrates describes like what an ideal or a just regime would be, he suggests that the first part of everyone's education should be musical. And the suggestion is that the type of music that we listen to or perform has a formative effect on our character. So I wonder if the relationship, it seems like what you're studying is how one's character, one's personality influences one's preference in music.
Yeah,
I also wonder if you have any thoughts about the reverse relationship. Does
yeah.
music shape our character in any way?
Yeah, I'm sure it has the potential to. I think that, um, well, I know that practicing music from a young age can really have some positive effects on like sort of brain development because like a lot of it requires certain coordination um, and just like sort of like multitasking, and it's also just sort of a different way of thinking than other tasks might require. All of which I'm sure sort of leads into um, different or becoming a different person, sort of personality wise. Yeah,
I'm going to take this in a maybe a more controversial direction, and
sure.
so I'll have to apologize for that in advance. But I
Mm,
wonder if also there's not just sort of a formal component, which is to say that whatever music it is that you play or practice, has a certain, effect on your brain development or whatever. It
sure.
it might be that I wonder if certain types of music have a kind of moral significance. Like I guess there's a lot of maybe hysteria sometimes. I think less so now, but I remember during
Mm,
I believe it was the early 2000s, there were congressional hearings about the moral sort of impact of certain types of popular music. Uh, so I wonder if, again, maybe this is the complete opposite approach to the one that you took in your own research, but I'm just curious if, uh, I don't know, I guess if the reading or research you did has any bearing on this idea.
Um, yeah, I guess since it is kind of looking at um, certain personality types and music preference, I guess like any correlations between like say less socially desirable traits, I guess, such as like neuroticism, which defines like how disorganized a person might be. Um, so like if maybe certain types of music um, are linked to high neuroticism scores, um, I guess potentially it could indicate that there are certain types of music that might have potentially negative effects on the populace. Though, of course, it could be the other way around, and people who are more disorganized are more interested in certain types of music.
Did you find that there was any particular type of music preference that was correlated with neuroticism? I'm just curious.
Um, yeah, actually, I did find it wasn't very strong, but interestingly enough, so there was a sort of negative correlation between, or I guess, yeah, positive correlation between, um, I think it was um, intense music, which in the original publication was used to categorize sort of abrasive and heavy music. Um, so there is a correlation, a positive correlation between that and neuroticism, um, which is quite interesting to think about.
So, does any of your research, I guess, provide any insight into whether there's a causal relationship in any of this, either one
Yeah,
way?
as it's sort of really just a correlational um, analysis, sort of just looking at correlations between um, music preferences and personality traits, as well as like different nationalities and ages. Um, we really can't say for sure like which causes which. Um, and an experiment would be necessary for that, but it still does offer um, interesting insights into hey, these two items might be related, and um, whether one causes the other, there's still this relationship between the two.
So, I know earlier you shared about the relationship between openness and, I guess, a taste for sophisticated music. Were there any other insights or connections that you made during your research that you thought were especially interesting?
Yeah, I guess one was sort of how so we looked at, or I looked at sort of I grouped a bunch of the respondents sort of into age groups, and sort of plotted those across different personality traits. And I think one of the most interesting ones was there was a fairly strong positive relationship between conscientiousness, which is sort of reflects a person's tendency to be responsible and well organized. So there's uh, a fairly significant correlation between that and age group. So as sort of we go up in the age groups, one is expected to be sort of on average more um, well organized or yeah, just responsible, which is quite interesting to see.
I mean, in some ways that seems intuitive, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
that in general, I mean, if anything, at least as you get older, you're forced to become more responsible.
right,
There's
exactly. Yeah.
external pressure there. Was there any sort of
Mhm.
musical correlation with conscientiousness or no?
Um, sorry, could you repeat that?
Was there any relationship between conscientiousness and taste in music?
His music. I don't think there was any really sort of um, like glaring correlation there that I could find. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it also occurs to me that since you had a variety of different age groups within your sample,
Mm,
certainly age, I think, must have a real impact on taste in music. Was
yeah.
there any way that you attempted to correct for that?
Um, well, in a way, I sort of, um, I guess, um, sort of embraced that difference across age. Um, so I did look at how music preference varied across the respondents in terms of age group. Um, so there are some interesting trends there as well, um, like that sort of intense music um, dimension that I talked about earlier. There was sort of like a downward trend as the age group increased. Sort of preference for intense music went down, um, which again, that's sort of somewhat intuitive, but still very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember observing this just about myself recently that when I was in high school, I listened to a lot of heavy metal. I played in metal bands, and that was, my thing. And 10 years later, I don't listen to metal at all. And I still appreciate it. But at the same time, I think it really is just the abrasiveness. Somehow
Yeah,
I don't enjoy that as much anymore.
yeah, that is quite interesting. Uh,
Anyway, though,
yeah,
I guess just as a more sort of procedural question, I'm curious. So, did you collect all of this data yourself, or was it a data set that was available online somewhere?
yeah. The data set was made available through the original publication that I was looking at. It was a really large data set. Actually, it had over 200,000 respondents. Um, so yeah, I was able to get or able to acquire the data set um, through the resources provided through the original study.
So then, I guess in a way, your paper is a kind of meta-analysis of the original study, or
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, I think that's a correct assessment.
so can you say anything about, I guess, how your mentor supported you through the process? I mean, I guess was it more collaborative, or were you kind of doing a lot of independent work and then checking in?
Yeah, yeah, I was given a lot of um, time to work through um, the the data on my own, finding these trends on my own. But I still would sort of check in with my mentor, and um, as soon as we met up, we would quickly go through what I've done over the week, and then sort of immediately get to really working on what we were planning to continue. Um, so yeah, it was, although it was sort of more like a check-in, we made we would make a lot of progress together, and um, he would yeah, really just provide me like insights and like into like, oh, maybe this is something that you might want to look at, or um, this trend is interesting. Like, how could you explain this trend in your own words? So just really giving me room to think for myself, but still uh, guiding me a lot through the process.
So do you feel like your experience with this program has prepared you to do independent research in the future?
Definitely, yeah. As mentioned, this one-on-one program really gave me a lot of sort of agency to work on my own time schedule and work uh, uh, on things that sort of uh, I could work on to sort of like just progress the study on my own, while still sort of meeting certain deadlines. Um, so I think that that really has given me um, great, like, it's been a great opportunity to learn sort of like how in the future, since I really hope to do research in the future, sort of just how I can work through these things, and just yeah, how to do research. So yeah, I think it's really prepared me for that.
So if you were to keep working on this topic, what do you think like a logical next step or next project would be?
Yeah, interesting. I guess yeah, interesting. Um, I think I've mostly exhausted the data set from this particular um, study. But I think it would be interesting to maybe look at if I were to continue this sort of broad topic of personality and um, music. Um, I would certainly try to find um, sort of new data sets that I could work with, maybe looking at uh, there are a lot of other models of personality, um, like the Myers-Briggs sort of like personality assessment. Uh, so maybe like different these different measures of personality might have like slightly different insights into how uh, music preference and sort of personality are connected. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like it would be really interesting. I wonder if, I guess, looking at doing the same type of study, but instead looking at like Myers-Briggs correlation to different Myers-Briggs personality types might
yeah,
even reveal some sort of underlying connection between different measures of personality. So
yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
sounds very
definitely.
interesting. Have you finished writing your paper for the for this project?
Yes, I have. Yeah. I've I wasn't really I didn't have the goal of sort of getting this um, published from the start. I really was mostly interested in just learning more about research methods and data analysis. Um, so I think I just sort of plan on keeping it as something I can look back on and um, really just as a learning experience.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid. Not everything has to be published, and I
Right.
think that sometimes the emphasis on publication isn't always helpful for learning.
Definitely.
Um, yeah. Is there anything that maybe you wish you had known earlier coming into the program, or any advice you might, give someone going to do a similar program that doesn't have a lot of research experience?
Yeah. Um, I guess, yeah. Um, I think with CCIR, one of the greatest things that I learned was um, sort of about the program itself was just how um, helpful the mentor can be, as well as the whole CCIR team. They really provided me with a lot of guidance to get me to where I want to be. And yeah, I think so. Yeah, for future CCIR students, I would really recommend just having more trust in the team's sort of capabilities and their ability to really just help one work through complex problems.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think that even, in high school or college, like I think that one of the best things that you can do as a student is like be aware of the resources that are available to you and be willing to sort of lean on them. I think people don't quite do that enough sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would really just like to thank my mentor, Dr. Recht, and the CCIR team as a whole for really just helping me um, work through this pretty difficult task. Research can be quite daunting, but I think CCIR has really made it a rewarding experience. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the goal. So I'm really glad that, that was your takeaway from your experience.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us and talk about your research. It was extremely interesting, and
sure.
I hope you keep doing psychological research in the future.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.